Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Before we get things going, a reminder to like us on Facebook and Twitter and give us that 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts from. It really does help. I hope all is well with you as we make our way through September without Michigan and Big Ten football. It really feels strange, doesn't it? With us today on our Game Day segment is the angel of the big house, beat writer Angelique Chengelis from the Detroit News. As of today, it seems we are no closer to knowing when or even if there will be a college football season for the Big Ten. The Presidents are being very quiet, but the rumor mills are busy. We've heard October 10th mentioned as a start date. If not then, maybe Thanksgiving weekend, or even January in domed stadiums. Again, those are all rumors. At this point, all we can do is wait patiently and watch other schools play football for now. My guest today says she has no clue what is going on behind the scenes with the Big Ten Brain Trust. Neither do the ADs, coaches, or players. The lack of communication between all parties involved has been stunning, and the damage in relations could be long-term. Up next on our Game Day segment is the angel of the big house, Detroit News beat writer Angelique Chengelis, on this week's edition of The Michigan Man, so stay with us. Back with us on our Game Day segment to talk Michigan football and politics and a lot of other stuff. Beat writer Angelique Chengelis from the Detroit News. Once again, great to have you back with us, Angelique.
Mike, have you thought about renaming your podcast from Game Day segment to when's the next Game Day segment? I mean, I've got my View from the Press Box podcast, and I keep saying I should change it to View from My Office.
My head hurts thinking about all of these things, but I'm not going to change the name because I live in hope that we're going to get good news. Maybe not the news we wanted, but some good news in the coming weeks.
Well, you would hope so. I mean, it's really, I've got to be honest, there's not a lot of news coming out of Ann Arbor, so people should not expect, President Schlissel, Mark Schlissel's not suddenly going to share everything he knows about the process. And Ward Manuel's a very, he's not a guy who gets out in the public, but there was the Nebraska president, Ted Carter, on Wednesday. He appeared on the radio show and in Nebraska, obviously, and said that the Big Ten Return to Competition Task Force is putting together plans, and the presidents and chancellors will vote on that very soon, he said. So that doesn't mean they're going to vote to return to competition, but it's something. It sounds like there's movement, and these coaches and athletic directors have really been persistent and want to play. And I think we all know that Jim Harbaugh wants to play. So, maybe something will come out of this that they resume the season or restart it, or I don't even know what, just finally started, I guess is the best way to describe it this fall.
It's just a very strange year, as we all know, and what's happening with football is crazy. I don't think it hit me until Saturday morning, and that was game day, but there was no Michigan or Big Ten football. It was a very strange feeling, wasn't it, Angelique?
It really was, Mike, and I've said this a few times that we know how it affects the players and the coaches, but for fans, for the parents of the players, it's really, this is what their life centers around. And yes, I'll write something like that. Someone will say, well, what about school? Yeah, okay, yes, they're going to classes, they're going to school, but this is something that everyone focuses on, football season. And for me, I mean, this is like for the first time since 1992. I didn't obviously cover a home opener or a season opener, but even Monday was weird. Like normally we all go out to Ann Arbor to talk to Harbaugh and some players, and that was the first Labor Day I've been off since 1992. So that was really strange. But yeah, I mean, we set our clocks to the season in a way, and I've said that a lot. That at least from my perspective, this is the bulk of my work is the 6 months. From July, end of July on, and you're so focused on football and you have a routine, and now you don't have that routine, and it's really odd. It really is, and I miss football. I really do. But yeah, I mean, I'm no different than anybody else in that sense.
Did you get to watch any of the games over the weekend? Any of the other college football games?
I watched some of them, and it's strange. What I miss is the crowd sound, and that's a little hard to adjust to. And yeah, you're seeing some teams with clearly some rust, and not as competitive as some of the games that you would hope that they would have been, but. Yeah, it was just difficult, but I didn't want to watch whole games. I've been watching a lot of the older games, like when BTN shows some of the throwback, the classic games. I've been watching a lot of those, and I miss the sound. I mean, the sound of football is a big deal, I think, Mike. I don't know. That's part of the whole experience, I think, is hearing the bands and hearing the fans screaming and the booing of the referees. I mean, all that kind of stuff.
No, I agree. I mean, even with the small number of fans in the stands, some games no fans. I was just glad to see college football again. I think we're sort of at that point in this country with sports. Really, this is supposed to be our diversion. It's life's candy store, so to speak. But I have a hunch most people felt the same way, Angelique. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing.
I totally agree. And I think the other thing we learn is like you said, this is like candy. I mean, college football is such a big part of the fabric of this country. And yeah, you can say NFL's king and you got your pro sports, but there is something missing when there isn't a lot of college football out there. And it'll pick up soon in the next couple of weeks if these other Power 5 conferences really get going. And I know that some games are postponed already, but you do realize that you can talk about how much you love college football, but when it's not there, you really see how much people miss it and how big a deal it is for everybody to watch games, to go to games, and you miss the tailgating and you miss the being with your friends, and whether it's at home at watching a game or going to the stadium, it's a really big part of our falls, and not to have it, it just everything's bizarre. Like you said, everything has an asterisk this year. Nothing feels normal for obvious reasons, and this is just another part of that.
As if it can't get more bizarre, last week President Trump got involved and spoke with Commissioner Warren about getting the Big Ten back in action, and whatever his motive, do you think his intervention was just a PR grab, or did it move the needle at all?
I don't know if it moved the needle. I mean, Kevin Warren, the Big Ten commissioner, did take a phone call with him, so maybe you can interpret that as some kind of step. But it feels political, and then there's the letter from the state, the House Speaker from Michigan this week as well. You don't want it to be political, but I think either way, I mean, Trump probably looks at this as a win-win. That if there's Big Ten football, then boom, he has an influence. And if it doesn't start up this year, he said, well, he tried. And I don't know that he's going to strong-arm the presidents. I mean, there's some presidents in the Big Ten who really believe that it's not safe. But it's hard for me to listen to that too when it's safe to open the campuses.
Yeah.
And it's really that part has really been hard for me to understand that logic. And, I know people will say, well, it's not a contact sport. Well, I think you could argue that there are some parts of college life that can be contact sports. I mean, no one's there. You see pictures all the time, Mike, of students in every campus, including Michigan State, all the Big Ten schools, they're having parties, they're going to stuff. They're not, some of them aren't wearing masks. So you're seeing, so why is that safe? And college football, which again, I know there's contact, but you can look at all the fall sports. There's contact in field hockey, there's contact in soccer. I just, that logic does not sit well with me. So I don't know if Trump's going to have any influence, but I think all the politicians are kind of jumping in on this now.
The president followed up, I think it was on Sunday or Monday, with a tweet that said, we could have Big Ten football soon without Michigan, Michigan State, Illinois, and Maryland. And he took a shot at Governor Whitmer. I'm not sure where he got that information, but can you imagine that is even a possibility that the Big Ten gets rolling without that many schools?
I really don't know where he got that information. I really don't. And of course, that's been someone takes that nugget and it just spirals out of control. And look, I love Twitter. I really do. I have fun on Twitter. But sometimes I just look at these rumors and these so-called experts from different programs throwing stuff out there, and I'm not sure where this came from. That Michigan's not going to participate, and Mark Schlissel's going to get fired, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, my gosh. My head hurts from looking at all this. I can't imagine from the people I've talked to, Mike, I can't imagine Mark Schlissel stepping in the way of football being played. Like, you know, it's just not going to happen. And I don't know why the governor would step in. I mean, high school, we've seen now the high school football that's been reversed, and they're going to be playing. So, you know, I don't know where some of this stuff comes from. I have not been told that anything close to Mark Schlissel would stand in the way of football. I mean, maybe he could, but that's not anything I've heard. And I think when you look at the numbers that Ward Manuel's throwing out there for the economic, how devastating this is going to be for the finances in the athletic department, I think any sensible president would look at that too and say, okay, I've got to weigh all of this now. And I'm sure they did before. This is not a surprise to them that they're going to take a huge, huge gash in the budget. But I think when they look at the medical, the information they're getting from the doctors on the task force, the infectious disease task force in the Big Ten that Kevin Warren started months ago, they have to weigh all this again and see has enough changed and is it worth it. And, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of public pressure. There's lawyers getting involved. This is all things that they have to consider now.
Absolutely, a lot of pressure, a lot of it amped up on Saturday with I know you were there in Ann Arbor for the players, fans, and the coaches as they marched, protested, whatever you want to call it, in Ann Arbor at the Big House. What was the turnout like for that, Angelique?
I'm so bad at that, at guesstimating, but I think it was between about 150 and 200 people. And it was parents, players showed up. Jim Harbaugh showed up. I think that was a surprise. And he was his father Jack was there as well. And it was a beautiful day, boy. It was a beautiful day for a college football game. And instead that there was a protest, and that's what I asked Harbaugh. I said, well, what was it like pulling up? You're not pulling up in the bus. Normally you're getting out and walking into the fans are cheering and walking into the locker room, and he's like, yeah, well, I would rather have been showing up for a game than a protest. But he felt he had to be there, and I think that anybody who read his comments saw that he was taking, I wouldn't say shots at Mark Schlissel, but he was making clear that he's had no communication with the university president, and pointed out that the program has had nearly 1,000 tests, COVID-19 tests, with no positive returns. So, and he said he has sent that information to Schlissel, but there has been no communication there. And I think the bottom line in all of this, when you talk to the players and talk to Harbaugh, that the lack of communication has really been a big deal. And these players, they've been in constant communication with Harbaugh and their coaches, but they just really, truly wanted to hear from the president and why he's not in favor of playing and what his rationale is. And they didn't get that. And that's not satisfying for them at all.
Does it surprise you there hasn't been more engagement between coach, president, and players?
It has. And I've heard from people saying, look, he's running a university. He doesn't need to be talking to football players. Well, this is my argument. How many times have you read or heard that football is the front porch of the University of Michigan? And you can argue that enrollment numbers are very high at Michigan, not only because of the fine academics, but also this appeal of being at the biggest stadium and going to games on Saturdays and being part of that. That's not why people go to Michigan, but it's a big part of the reason why they go to Michigan. And with that in mind, and you've got this enormous athletic department budget, yes, I do think the president could have found one opportunity to get on a Zoom call with all these players to talk about it, to show the data. And I had a long conversation with Carlo Kemp, and he's Michigan's co-captain last year, and he's the football player rep on the commissioner. Kevin Warren has had 2 calls with athletes, and each school has a football player rep and a rep from another sport. And Carlo is the football rep for Michigan. And his point was, he asked Kevin Warren a couple of questions, including one, about what your son playing football and why does he get the choice and I don't. But aside from that, I mean, his point is, look, if they didn't want like the Pac-12's 12-page medical report and the data. They don't want that. He said 1 page with maybe 5 bullet points and boom, boom, boom. This is why we think it's unsafe to play and reasons to back that up. And Carlo's like, you know what? Maybe if I had read that and it was clear to me, I would have said, you're right. You're making the right decision. But he said he hasn't seen anything or heard anything that has given him that response. So I think having some clarity on that issue from the president would have been very helpful. And I guess that this is the proper channel to go Schlissel to Ward Manuel, and then Ward communicates it. But this is football. I mean, I do think that Jim Harbaugh was entitled to a conversation with him as well.
Well, absolutely. In this day and age, communications is vital. I think we're seeing from the time the process started with the presidents discussing would there be a season, would there not be a season, there was a complete lack of transparency. It's very, very important, and it doesn't have to be information that you necessarily like, but an explanation, as Carlo said, goes a long way in helping you at least say, okay, I respect and I understand your decision.
It does. And this is the other thing, Mike. I mean, this is a college campus, a university like Michigan, where they encourage the players the students, all of the students, to ask questions and to be inquisitive and to want to learn and be curious. And, and then there's this lack of transparency. So I'm not sure what is the message here? So, yeah, you can ask questions, but we don't really, we encourage it, but we're not going to answer them. Yeah. And that's how I look at it. I'm like, this is your university has really been on the forefront for many years of student activism and encouraging that. And in a sense, this feels like some kind of student activism in a way. And I think it's also when you look at these Mark Schlissel videos that have come out on Twitter where he's talking to the students, and at the end, when he says "Go Blue," I'm just like, okay, that's a little disingenuous to me, because that's I didn't go to Michigan, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but that to me is a sports slogan that has become part of the university culture. But it is a sports slogan, and here you are not communicating with sports, yet you're still using that as part of how people communicate on campus. And if it's that important, if it's that much part of your fabric, then I think you need to pay more attention to their needs, and their need is an explanation, a real explanation, and also an explanation about what's the next step. Because these players, I think the other thing that's been really hard to watch, Mike, is that Kevin Warren releases a schedule, a 10-game schedule, conference only, and then within the week it's gone. So, people can say, oh, those poor kids, they have nothing left, go to class. If I heard that one more time, I'm just like, are you kidding me? I mean, this is, they're starting camps, and then suddenly they think that they're going to be playing. They're going to open with Purdue. They're going to travel to whatever places, Minneapolis, to Columbus, and then they pull it away. I mean, that's really not fair. I just think it's a jerky thing to do.
No, I agree with that. And when there's a lack of communication, it's a breeding ground for rumors, and they abound right now. Last week, Dan Patrick at ESPN said his sources were saying if the testing protocols could be finalized and put in place, the season would kick off on October 10th. Everyone got excited. Then he said on this past Tuesday, his sources were saying there were not enough teams in the conference willing or ready to play this fall. It's hard to believe that after postponing the season, just a few weeks later, we're hearing, maybe we can start the season on October 10th. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense either, does it?
It doesn't. And I would say that that's probably, I think that's a date that probably originated more out of Columbus. I mean, Ryan Day clearly has a phenomenal team. He wants to play. He wants to keep Justin Fields at quarterback. He needs to get something going and get into the national championship playoff picture. And that would be the date that would really be critical, especially for a program like Ohio State. I don't want to start rumors saying Ryan Day started it, but that just seems like if you're connecting dots. But I listened to the Dan Patrick stuff too, and I mean that last comment you mentioned, I mean, it really sounded more like he was reading the Donald Trump tweet, the more recent one.
Yeah,
saying some schools don't want to participate or won't participate. And I'm tired of sifting through these things. Part of me is like, well, I'm not sure who Dan Patrick knows. He hasn't been spot on about things. The only thing I've been told from people who are, part of the discussions is rapid testing is a huge deal, and from the Big Ten standpoint. And as long as there's rapid testing and it's rapid in the sense of like a pregnancy test kind of rapid. Like they can do it the night before the game. They can do it the morning of a game. And then they'll feel more comfortable with it. And that's been part of, Wojo, Bob Winowski, our Detroit News columnist, has been really consistent on this, Mike, the whole time saying, I'm not saying they have to play. They should be playing. He was just saying, why not wait? Why not see what's coming up medically? What maybe there's going to be some testing. And that's been my standpoint, too. I mean, I'm still not sure why they pulled the plug so early, because we are seeing advancements in testing. And even, maybe within a week after the Big Ten made the decision to postpone, there was talk of a saliva test that could be manufactured very soon and be out there. But it has to be in abundance. Teams have to be able to do this. And are there some teams that maybe aren't going to be as prepared? Probably, and I would look at Rutgers, I'd look at Michigan State, a couple teams with new coaches, didn't have spring ball, which would have been vital for them, tough time recruiting for them. But do I think teams would not play? I find that hard to believe, because I think you also have to look at these programs get a big chunk of that TV money every year. And if you don't play football, would you be qualified to get? I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of things you have to look at, because, that's every team gets a equal part of the pie, but if you're not playing, why would you?
The testing thing, though, Angelique, I keep thinking about that. 4 or 5 weeks ago, we did hear from the presidents that testing protocol, having something in place, having all 14 teams on the same page was very important. And then all of a sudden, a week or two later, we have the news about the rapid test being out there. And now high schools are using that testing a couple of times a week in the South, in Mississippi, Alabama, and giving them very accurate information. You're thinking, if a high school program can do it, why can't a Division I college team and conference do that?
Well, I'm assuming it comes down to liability. I mean, and I've always thought that was a big part of the decision-making process from the many of the university presidents. And but I agree with you, especially when you're seeing. I mean, Michigan State's had really good numbers in terms of their testing and their protocols. Michigan's has outstanding numbers. Yes, several programs have paused, but most of them have been quite a while ago. Like after players started returning to campus for voluntary tests. I know Maryland had something more recent, but I think some people are saying, well, when we pulled the plug, a lot of the players are like, okay, why should we be as vigilant? Why should we be as disciplined as we were if there's no football? Why don't we just go back and be normal students like everybody else and kind of throwing, no cares there. We're going to go to our parties and stuff. So I thought that was another reason why it was not a good idea to pull the plug early, because these athletes were learning how to adjust to the protocols and how to live a disciplined life in this current environment. If it means playing football or playing whatever fall sport you play, you've got to do this, and this just to not have a positive test and to remain vigilant. And I see it with the Michigan football players. I really do. Even now, I mean, they're still practicing. And I've interviewed them in the evening sometimes over the phone, and I'll be like, you ever go out? And they just sort of laugh at me. Like, maybe the Bush's grocery store and maybe to pick up food here and there, but they all know what it takes. And I think I just went off on a tangent, but I just think it would be really, really hard to imagine a team not playing. And but you look at Wisconsin, and what I read is they haven't practiced since the Big Ten pulled the plug. So we'll see how long it takes for them to get ready if they do restart a season or start. I keep saying restart if they do start a season.
Yeah. A couple of weeks ago, last week actually, I had Chris Hutchinson on the show, Dr. Chris Hutchinson, and I know you've talked to him too, but he said some things that really made too much sense to me, such as he asks the question, if it's safe to play in November, we don't know if it is yet, but why isn't it safe now? And I tend to agree with him, Angelique, and I mean, so does Duke School of Medicine, so does the Mayo Clinic. The experts, and I think this is a frustrating thing in this, are not all on the same page either, are they?
No, they're not. And I guess you can argue that's science. I mean, different people interpret data differently. I think we look at football stats, and you and I can interpret a stat differently. I understand that, and I have a sister who's a physician, and we discuss this stuff a lot, and she has a different take on it as well. But I think you also have to consider age groups, and a lot of the decision makers are quite a bit older, and that is this coronavirus targets. We're seeing data that it's more. I think it's more challenging, obviously, for people who are older than younger. So, are you paying attention to that when you're making these decisions? And I trust Chris Hutchinson's all of his opinions on this. I mean, he's at Royal Oak Beaumont, the busiest hospital in Michigan. He's seen over 1,000 COVID patients. He's been in the thick of it. He reads the data. He studies all these different journal articles. And people can say, well, I mean, he's got a vested interest. His kid wants to play. Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's a big thing to consider. Is he's okay with his son playing, his son Aiden. And to me, that's a very important point. And the other thing with this too, Mike, is I've done a couple stories with Chris from April when he's in the thick of it to afterwards, and asking him then, would you be comfortable with Aiden playing? And one of the things I've missed in this a lot of national sports writers have really focused on, no, you can't play because of this. No, you can't do this because of this. And his voice wasn't amplified, and I'm not sure why. I mean, here's a guy who's been in the thick of it. He played football. His son plays football. And why hasn't his voice been out there more? And as a differing opinion, because I think that a lot of the reporting has been very one-sided. And I'm all about balance. And I thought it would have been important to get his opinion and his take out there, and you really haven't heard it on a national level. It's been mostly focused on this is why you shouldn't play. And that's been a little disappointing when you read all these national stories, because I think Chris Hutchinson has a very important voice in this.
Oh, absolutely. I think his point was so valid about the data, or the lack of transparency on what data Michigan, not only Michigan, but the Big Ten was using to make a determination. He kept citing the only thing that the presidents or anyone from the Big Ten has mentioned is this JAMA study that was actually, it was a German report, and the average patient was 50 years old. They put want ads in the newspaper in Germany and conducted the study that way. And he said, if that's what you're using, something that's been discredited, even questioned by many of the professors at the University of Michigan School of Medicine, they didn't think it was a valid example to use when applying it towards young athletes. Things like that really muddy the waters too.
Well, of course, and that's Chris's point too. When the Michigan parents' letter went out and they wanted transparency, they wanted to see the data. Chris's point is, I can read medical data. I'm a physician. I'd like to see it and like to see what informed their decision. And I don't think they're ever going to release that. And Tom Mars can FOIA all the Big Ten schools, but you can't FOIA the Big Ten and Northwestern, obviously, since it's a private school. So I don't think we'll ever really see all of that, the concrete evidence medically that they used. You look at the Penn State doctor who released the cardiac results, and the conversation he had with reporters there, And then comes out and said, "Wait, the data was that's not right. That's not what And Chris is texting me saying 35%. I've never heard that. So, and then that was discredited. So it just when you hear some of these other presidents like Nebraska's, I mean, at least you're hearing from them and you're getting some information. It's just. The PR, it has been a PR fiasco from the Big Ten's, at least my opinion, from the Big Ten standpoint. And it really, no one's saying open your books completely. And you understand that's not the way things have been done. But everything this year has been crazy. So this is one time I think that they have to open some of this and let people like Chris Hutchinson look at the data. And but I know they have their 14-person task force, their doctors who have helped them sift through everything. But I think there's enough people disagreeing with it, so maybe you need to throw it out there and let people look at it.
Well, as we know, there is a Big Ten committee developing a plan to commence play and do it safely, and we all agree on that, safe being the key word. And it sounds like, as we just talked about a few minutes ago, the rapid testing, the tracing, and protocols have to be the same for all 14 teams, Angelique. And if everyone is on that same page, maybe we can get started. But it sounds like getting all 14 teams on the same page, which I don't understand. It seems like that is a tall order right now.
Yeah, I don't understand that either. I mean, the Big Ten, when Warren released the 10-game schedule, that was part of it. They also released the protocols for how to handle this and for testing. And, everyone's going to have to get on the same page if they want to play. And that's going to be the deciding factor. I don't think there's anything else that could keep a team from playing other than getting on the same page testing-wise. And it's going to be, it's expensive to test. There's no doubt right now. But when you look at the price of these rapid tests, they're definitely coming down. They're definitely affordable. And it's just something that they're going to have to budget for now. And unfortunately, the budgets are getting hit hard. But if you can resume some football, that means TV money's coming in. And I know it's not about the almighty dollar, but that is something that they're going to have to consider right now. And they're going to have to get on the same page in terms of testing, because there's no way you can ask Michigan to travel to Rutgers and they're not doing the same thing. You just can't. I mean, that they just wouldn't be able to have a game. So that's I think ultimately what will be the determining factor in who plays and who doesn't. But I can't imagine that anybody would want to sit out because of that.
Well, Angelique, what does your reporter's instinct tell you about the chances of there being a late fall or winter season in the end for the Big Ten?
Well, I mean, I'm as bad as I am about estimating crowds. I'm bad at this too. But I do think I just get the sense that there's so much of a push to play, and I'm not saying that that's what's going to influence presidents, and if they have this re-vote, that they're going to say, oh, well, the people want to play, so, and reporters are saying that we should play, so let's just do what they say. They're not going to be like, that's not going to be how it happens, but I do think that November seems reasonable, and I'm not sure if that's going to satisfy a lot of the players. I think there's still some on the fence. Will they play? Won't they play? Should they get ready for the NFL draft? It'll be great for the younger players. There's going to be more opportunity for them to play. But I'm looking at more like a late November. And I went back just for fun. The Lexington Herald-Leader in April asked a bunch of college reporters, what do you think? Will the season happen? And if it does, what will be this? And I said in April I thought that they would play a non-conference, no non-conference games, just a conference-only schedule, and they'd start probably early October. So I was almost right.
It was close.
Yeah, I mean, because I just looked at the calendar and thought, well, you could get in a season if you started October.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that this will give them a little more wiggle room to figure out the testing process and to determine if rapid testing is going to be available in abundance and can they all handle it. And so I'm looking at November. That might be wishful thinking, but it seems to make sense versus, January 1 is certainly an option as well, but I'm not sure playing in dome stadiums, that's not going to be that appealing. It'll be football, but why not start November? And and see where it goes.
I think a lot of people agree with that assessment. So final question for you, Angelique. Is it fair to say the Big Ten at this point jumped the gun on postponing the season? They don't like to say cancel. I know it's postponed. Or do we have to wait really and see what happens with the Big 12, the ACC, and the SEC before we can answer that question?
I don't think you have to wait, Mike. I really do. I as I mentioned, Wojo's columns. I mean, he's been preaching about why not wait. I mean, and he and I both have said we're not sure that this wasn't the right decision, but it seems like the right decision would have been to wait and to see. And I really am baffled why the Big Ten pulled the plug on August 11th. And I know talking to people there, they said, look, we were very careful to say postpone. We didn't say cancel. We could play in October. We could play in November. We could play in December, I was told. And so I get that. But I just don't get, why not wait? Why not let these guys go through a preseason camp, see how things go even in terms of testing through a preseason camp, and see, what kind of, how disciplined are these guys, and just see. I mean, you don't want anybody to get to contract this virus. I'm not saying that, and I'm not being cavalier about that. But I think if you talk to any of the football players, they would have preferred that option. And at least they were practicing for something. And right now, the Michigan players are practicing for this combine that Jim Harbaugh has set for August. The day they would have played Ohio State, August 24th. He's going to have NFL scouts there so they can get their measurables done. So they're staying focused. They're staying motivated because of that. But I think they would have, if they could have been preparing for a season that may or may not have happened, if they said to them, we're not guaranteeing a season, I think they still would have wanted to go through practices. And these guys miss padded practices. They need this. And like a guy like Aiden Hutchinson, who's on the cusp of trying to figure, should he go to the NFL? He needs to practice. This is not making him better just to constantly go through walkthroughs. It's good, but it's not making him better. And that's what I think that they need to consider that as well.
Well, here with us on our Game Day segment today has been beat writer Angelique Chengelis from the Detroit News. And, of course, the news and events will, I'm sure, be changing rapidly in the incoming days and weeks. So, Angelique, we hope the next time that we get together to talk, maybe it's about Michigan, Ohio State, and the game in whenever, November, December, who knows at this point. But hopefully the next time it's about football, who Michigan's playing, and what's happening in the Big Ten. So, as always, great to have you back on the show, and we look forward to that next visit.
I do too, Mike, and I'm just laughing because here it is early September, and we're not talking about quarterbacks, like the quarterback battle. So, I'm with you. I hope that we're talking about, we do that annually, speaking about the Michigan-Ohio State game during that week, and I will plan on that and hope that it's this season too. If it's the right decision, I hope that we're doing that.
Well, Angelique, thank you for your time once again, and as I mentioned, we look forward to that next visit.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks again to the Angel of the Big House for being with us this week. Next week, we are scheduled to have beat writer Austin Meek from The Athletic with us. Will we have more news on an upcoming season by then? Let's hope so. The Big Ten is reportedly, as of tonight, and we're recording on Wednesday evening, there's supposed to be another vote coming up at the end of the week, Friday, maybe even Saturday. So we shall see by next week. We might have some more news. That will do it for this week, though. Please tell your Maize and Blue family and friends about the show, and join us again next week. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go Blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V-Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!